Hi, I'm Doug McClinic. I'm the Church Multiplication Catalyst for Luminex. And we want to talk today about how people belong in your church. And this is a sort of sociology of different group sizes within the church. And it works off of the work of Edward T. Hall, and Joseph Myers, a sociologist, and then J.R. Woodward wrote a book applying it more to the church. The idea is that there are really four kinds of spaces within the society, within the group life of your church. One is the public space, which is anything from 70 and above, and people relate with one another. Usually they relate toward the front in a kind of a worship service or a sermon. They see each other at church, and so it lends a kind of public visibility to your church. When I see you at church, you belong to church, and when you see me at church, you know we belong there in that particular group of believers. It's really important for functions like public worship and public teaching, and it gives a sense of size and significance and depth to a church. The next space that is identified is called the social space. It's a group of about 20 to 50. It's really the size of a party. And we relate with one another in a social atmosphere. We don't necessarily know one another well or personally or intimately, but we know one another socially. And a lot of group life happens around food, it happens around fun, it happens around fellowship, it can be Bible study, prayer groups, all kinds of things. The missional community, which is so often talked about in today's church, sort of fits into this social space, groups of 20 to 50. And often the church of the late 20th century in the small group movement tended to drop this space, and it left a deficiency in the life of the church. So social spaces are events, parties, missional communities, fellowship groups and circles that work on a more social level. The personal space are groups of 5 to 12. This would be your small group kind of ministry, or a small class, or an accountability group, a group of people that can know one another well and know each other personally, and hold one another accountable for their life as disciples. It's a place where you can huddle to make disciples or to work as a small ministry team. And so these kinds of spaces are really important in the life of the church. And finally, there's the group of 2 to 4, the more intimate space. This is one-on-one discipling relationships, or discipleship triads, or very small group teams that work on a very specific project. You get to know one another much more intimately and much more in depth at that level. And a lot of leadership development occurs here in this intimate space. You can see the pattern biblically played out in Jesus' ministry. Jesus had the 3 and had a more intimate relationship with Peter, James, and John. He had the 12. These were deep personal relationships. People that he wanted to be with him, the Bible says, and then to be sent out to preach the kingdom. And then the social group, we see Jesus sending out the 70 on a mission together. This is where the whole idea of missional community at that level comes from. And then the crowd. Jesus spoke to crowds and preached his message to large crowds, sometimes even in the thousands. And so all of those spaces were part of Jesus' strategy for making disciples and helping people to belong in the church that he loved so much that he died for. And so I just wanted to give you a little background onto this piece of sociology. Try to work on ministries that work through all of these different social spaces, whether you're planting a church or but you're redesigning some of the group life of your church. And if you need some help with this, my email address is at the bottom. You can get in touch with us on the Luminex team, and we'd be happy to help you as you strengthen your church and develop leaders.